Soho, you Google history of Soho area. This was sort of the seediest, the most downtrodden part of London. When I came here, there were just brothels down the street. That was in 1980. No, actually, well, yes, 1980 is when I moved to the UK. Prior to that, I joined Krishna Consciousness in Montreal. Moved to the temple in 1973. I was in a bowling alley where we lived. It was very spacious. It's very easy to clean also. And then from there I went to Winnipeg and Minneapolis, and I moved to Chicago. And at a certain point, when I first went to Chicago, when I first went, then Jagadish Prabhu was the GBC, then later Jai Tirtha Prabhu became the GBC, who was also the GBC of the UK at the time. And he was also the GBC of Detroit. So Detroit, Chicago, they were sort of relatively close as far as American distances go. It's a little different than the UK. That was one of my first experiences with the UK. It was claustrophobia. I wasn't used to everybody living on top of everybody else, and there not being real space. And at a certain point, Tamal Krishna Maharaj became the GVC of Chicago, and he inspired me to go to. I'm saying that in a nice way. He inspired me we had a long-standing relationship, very loving relationship, but he went through difficult times and experiences, and went to Texas. The last thing in my life I wanted to do was, be in Texas and be a Texan, Hare Krishna. And from Texas I went to an even more redneck area, if you know what redneck is, and that was Oklahoma, where we had this huge big farm. That farm was called Harmony, and it was teeming with snakes and all kinds of wildlife, scorpions, first scorpions I saw in my life, live scorpions, and tarantulas. It was a wonderful place, beautiful place, and I used to have to ride around the farm. It took a long time to ride around on the farm, and then I sort of really left. I left that zone. I left Tamal Krishna Maharaj's GBC ship and supervision, and Jai Tirtha Prabhu said, "Why don't you come here?" And he sent me a one-way ticket to London. I had to go to Detroit to pick it up. You could get one-way tickets at that time, and I came here. I was in the spring of 1980, so sometime I think in April, maybe in May. And at that time, the UK had this very wonderful place, which is called Chaitanya College. That was one of my first loves after my wife. That was Chaitanya College, and of course Krishna came after my wife. Then came Chaitanya College, and and I actually drove straight from the airport to Chaitanya College. It was already quite an exhausting experience flying here. And then we drove there. UK was very different than it is now, although I have to admit I haven't, can come forward if you like, give room for others. Although I haven't gone that distance recently. And, but as I mentioned, I felt I'm used to, I grew up in Canada. And I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and Quebec. Just to give you an idea, Quebec is bigger than all of Europe going up to Moscow. Although, of course, Moscow's not part of Europe. And so it's a phenomenally big place, and there were only like, I think, 7 million people, 6 million people living there at the time. So that's like just a certain quarter of London. And at that time, UK had a very, Jai Tirtha Prabhu was the GBC. He was also the GBC of South Africa. I'm thinking Mauritius, but I don't think so. I think Radha Krishna was, but anyway, South Africa and UK and Detroit. He was a extremely capable manager, and he was something which was sort of quite unique to Krishna consciousness at the time. He was a visionary. He had a vision, and he had an idea about where things could go and how to organize things. One of the really extraordinary I don't call it mechanisms, but one of the extraordinary features of his management was the bhakti making program, which was never paralleled before and has not been seen, unfortunately, even in this yatra after. And in that, it depended upon very, very close cooperation between the whole yatra, which he did something that wasn't necessarily what Srila Prabhupada liked, and he amalgamated the whole yatra into one entity that was being managed by one person. Well, he was the GBC, and then the national secretary, we still call it national? No, we call it zonal supervisor. And then what's equivalent of the zonal supervisor now, it was Vichitravirya Prabhu, who has since been passed away. And he was a very, very nice devotee. He was also a real gentleman. At that time, that's why I need the help. At that time, my godbrother was the president of the manor. What's his name? The really good actor? Bhumadev. Bhumadev was the president of the manor. Akandari Prabhu came after. And there was Soho Street. Was there even the president of Soho Street at the time? Huh? Rancho Prabhu. Oh yes, of course. Rancho Prabhu was the president of Soho Street. Now I first came to, I'll just back up. You have to remind me where I was. Rancho was the president of Soho. It was 1980. But I first came to the UK in 1979, and I came on my way to India. This was from Chicago, and that's when I took sannyas. Hey, that's what they thought. 1979. So 1979 is 40 years ago. So it was 40 years ago I took sannyas. Someone sent me that. I couldn't remember what was that landmark that someone told me. Gaur Purnima. Gaur Purnima. Gaur Purnima. Myself, Indrajumna Maharaj, who? Prabhu Vishnu, Prabhu, Ananda Tirtha, no, not Ananda Tirtha, Ananda Swarup, Ananda Swarup, the four of us. And he's passed away also. Yes, so I came in 1979 and waited to take sannyas. I had a very extraordinary dream on the plane coming here. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about myself. And then I came, and I'll just tell you the dream. It was on the plane, and I was walking with Prabhupada with some other devotees, and Prabhupada stopped, and I said, Prabhupada, can I ask you a question? He said, yeah. He says, I'm about to take sannyas. So how do you become free from attachment to sex life? So Prabhupada had his hand in his bead bag, as he usually did, and he just looked at me and he said, Harinam, 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 Eva Kevalam. That was the end of the dream. But it was very, very, very impressive dream. You can see I remember it 40 years down the road. And I came to stop here particularly because my old temple president from Montreal, Sripati Prabhu, I don't know if anybody knows him, but he had come here. I don't remember the route. When I first joined the temple in Montreal, Urma Shlokadas was the temple president. He was a really wonderful temple president, and Sripati Prabhu took over from him. And so he came, he was here, and we were corresponding. He said, come, stay overnight. So that's how I arranged my ticket. I stayed overnight, and then I got a little, I didn't get to go up as far as Chaitanya College, but I went to see Bury Place. That was really claustrophobic. I just couldn't understand it. I'm in a boat, and that's where Radharani still were. And then I came over here, and this place was a construction site. And I came, this floor had been done, because originally this building had 2 stories or 3 stories. Huh? That's 3. 2 stories and then the top. And so that was Jai Tirtha Prabhu thing. He bought this building. This building was purchased for $80,000. In 1977, when Prabhupada came, he came to take darshan of Radharani. Then he was in the Rolls Royce then. Finally, Prabhupada was riding a Rolls Royce. And he was in a Rolls Royce, and he came here. They stopped on the other side of the street, and then Jai Tirtha pointed out to him, Srila Prabhupada, this building is available for £80,000. Prabhupada said, buy it. Here's Oxford Street. Here's, although Soho is Soho, but you can see how much it's changed. What's the value?
I think book value is probably around 4.5 to 5 million. Gross development value probably about 10.
So it was a good investment. Of course, £80,000 was a little more than it is now, but it's still not a lot of money. And Rancho Prabhu was here. Shripati introduced me to him. He's an architect, and it's not a good thing for architects to build buildings because that's not what they're geared for. But if you're a devotee, then you know how to do everything. At least that's the theory. And but he did an amazing job squeezing a phenomenal lot of things in this relatively tiny little place. This place was also a pub, and then it had some other unmentionable things going on. And it was a construction site. We went to some of the top stories were just, I don't know, something was there. It was maybe infrastructure was there, but you could look out, there was open space. But what was going on here was there was this one lady that Jai Tirtha had bought here, who was the wife of the temple president, and she was an artist. And wasn't an artist, she was actually a interior designer, artist, and so on. And these things were being cast along here at the time, the archers and everything else, and that was very, very impressive. And then at that time, the thing was the Rancho Prabhu was going to take sannyas as soon as he finished building Soho Street. So going back to 1980, and Bhumadev Prabhu was there, and Jai Tirtha was the GBC, and everything was managed and coordinated in one place, which was then Chaitanya College. That's where the head officers were. So bills went there, everything went there. Finances were wherever Lakshmi was collected, it went to one central place. Finances were managed in one place. Bills were paid in one place. So you wanted to do something, you had to apply to that administration. So not exactly, you could say the ideal thing, but it was extremely productive. And what I was mentioning before was in terms of making devotees. And this was at a certain time in the history of ISKCON. This was 1980. So this was 3 years after Srila Prabhupada had departed. And 3 years after Srila Prabhupada had left the world. So the more or less the guruship of ISKCON was limited to 11 members, of whom by then one had gone wayward. But nonetheless, the faith that devotees had in Srila Prabhupada, which was an extraordinary thing. If you were there at the time, who here was there at the time of Srila Prabhupada? Okay, so it's you can see we're a dying breed. Everyone's a dying breed, but we're going sooner than you are. And Prabhupada's presence on the planet was such a powerful thing that you could feel it wherever you were. And devotees had such an extraordinary faith in Prabhupada. It's like, Prabhupada, when he was meeting with a newspaper reporter, a newspaper said, I hear that the guru has absolute control over the disciple, and the disciple does whatever the guru says. And Prabhupada pointed to Brahmananda Prabhu and he said, yeah, if I tell him to jump out the window, he'll jump out the window. I don't know if our communications director would use this kind of language nowadays, but Srila Prabhupada wasn't afraid to do so. And in any case, that same type of extraordinary faith that devotees had in Prabhupada, it became channeled to these other Vaishnavas who were really quite extraordinary in their own right. And my experience was that there were sort of different schedule or timing in which devotees came to Srila Prabhupada. And my understanding or realization is these devotees had, at least some of them had previous association with Srila Prabhupada, and others had certainly practiced devotional service in different ways. But in any case, these 11 were very, very talented persons. And very interestingly, our GBCs here in the UK were also those that I knew afterwards, Jaitirtha Bhagwan, were very unique in their abilities. They were very talented. And let me remind you that this country has not had an English GBC. And to the best of my knowledge, it has not had an English temple president. Don't ask me why. Well, Rancho Prabhu was the English temple president. So he has that unique distinction and honor of being a temple president. Huh? Bhumadev was? Kandari was Irish. Bhumadev's English? Sure? Anyway, he lives in America now. But I think you're right. Okay. So what I was trying to talk about was what the Bhakti program was. And the Bhakti program worked between Soho Street, the Manor, and Chaitanya College. This was the sort of indoctrination center. And devotees, particularly ladies, went out on the streets and they were distributing books and doing Sankirtan, but they were also passing out invitations. Some of these were £1. You had a £1 free lunch. It looked like a pound, but it was an invitation. And they were passing out invitations to people to come for the lunch program. And the lunch program was the real crux of the preaching here. So, I don't know when it was, noon. Here we had kirtan, talk, and prasadam. And prasadam was the main thing. So guests would come, they would sit down, and there were devotees here who were preaching to them. I was just thinking, here at Soho Street, the main preacher at that time was no, Rohinandan was at the Manor. He did the lunch program here, and then who was in charge of the program? Danavir. No, I think Danavir, who's Danavir Maharaj now, was the other way around, and then it was who was, and then Vipramukhya. They were. Anyway, let's say it was that they were here, they were in charge and doing that, and there was real manpower here for that. There was also Sankirtan devotees who went out; they were an integral part, and they cultivated people, young people coming back. And it was a time when a lot of the youth of the UK just came to London looking for something, looking for a job, looking for meaning, looking for life, looking for drugs, looking for so many things. So they, whatever they were looking for, there's plenty of it over here. And they also ran into devotees, and because they couldn't get away from them, because we had a big Sankirtan party. And from here, when sort of the momentum had built up enough, a person would be sent to the manor. Well, why don't you just go out to the manor for a weekend course on, well, now we say on bhakti yoga or meditation and so on. At that time it was just Hare Krishna, on chanting Hare Krishna and reading Bhagavad Gita. And once they got to the manor, things got really tight from over there. And there was a good percentage that, once having gone there, one never returns. They went to the manor, and from the manor they went to Chaitanya College. So why don't you just try out our more elaborate training? That was the whole point of the weekend at the manor, is to convince these guests that they should go on the Bhakta program. And there was a 2-month Bhakta program, and then Vipramukha went and was doing that. Anyway, it moved around, but there were some very expert people, and these people were really good. And this continued on for quite some time. At its height, the yatra wasn't making any memory for me to remember what it was. At its height, the yatra was making 120 devotees a year. Height means probably 1 year, maybe 2. 120 devotees a year. And they ended up in Chaitanya College, and once they finished the Bhakta program, they ended up on Sankirtan. And that was where I took over. So, yes, I came here with the idea. Jaitirtha said, yeah, why don't you come here? Because I wanted to do college preaching instead of being a temple president, which is more or less what I had been doing for the years, except for that time at Harmony Farm when I was doing all kinds of farming things, cutting trees, and so on. Hare Krishna. Do I know you? Okay, you seem to be pretty close. Yeah, come on. Everyone can just sort of move up. And that was a phenomenal. It was a machinery, and it was a machinery, and it really worked. It was extraordinary, and it made a lot of devotees, and of course the one theme of that was, which we don't do nowadays. No, we don't do it nowadays. You don't do it nowadays. Was that the guru, who was Jaitirtha, he was part of the picture. In other words, everyone preached on behalf of him. Devotees became his disciple, and I'm saying that from a point of view of being an asset and something that was also very productive. It gave a face to people's spiritual life, that I'm, connecting with a person aside from connecting with an institution. So that was the preaching that was going on here, and it's 5 to 8. You can see why I said we should start at 5:30. It's a long history. So I arrived in Chaitanya College. I came to do university preaching. Jaitirtha Prabhu asked, well, why don't you take charge of the Sankirtan? And at that time there was one of my godbrothers, Rochan Prabhu, who was here. And he introduced me to living in a motorhome. Now this was new to me. I'd never lived on wheels before, but from that period, from 1980 until 1996, when I sold motorhome, I just lived in wheels. And it was a great life. It was just suited to a sannyasi life. We moved around, and so I was sort of stationed in Chaitanya College. And I can't go through all the details of the history, and it's boring. But I'm sorry that I have to put myself here, but I'm the one I'm giving my perspective of what happened. Just at the time when I came, Jaitirtha Prabhu started to get involved, have difficulty, spiritual difficulty. I would say that the basis of that spiritual difficulty was that he thought that a guru should be on the highest level of devotional service, and he thought that he could achieve that by artificial means. So ultimately, our GBC body, actually he sort of split from ISKCON. He went to the Gaudiya Math, but then he really went his own way. That happened in 1982. 82. It was a very extraordinary experience because, remember what I told you, all these devotees who'd been made, they all saw Jaitirtha as their guru. They'd just been trained, brainwashed towards this person. So the good thing was that at that year I decided to take the Sankirtan devotees to India, to Mayapur. So I'd taken the Sankirtan devotees, men and women? Just the men. Uh-oh. There was a good reason for that. I can't remember what it is, but I'm sure there was. And I took all the Sankirtan men to India. I guess the ladies stayed here, and along with most of the rest of the yatra. So it was a very strange time, strangest time I'd ever experienced in Mayapur. There was, aside from the splitting off and trying to, literally, I was standing out on the road leading out to the gate and telling the Sankirtan devotees, you can't go to Jaitirtha, who'd now crossed to the other side of the river, and was telling all his disciples to come there. And actually, almost without exception, everyone, Radha Krishna, everyone without exception, everyone stayed. So that was good. We built up a good relationship. So at least they believed me, and then they believed the GBC. And so what had happened at that time, when we came back from the UK, we had, I don't know how many men, how many devotees were on Sankirtan at that time? How many ladies? 25? And so the men must have been 30, 40 men. Yes. I remember that I'd worked out that 70 was sort of, at that time, sort of the healthy maximum for devotees. At that time, you remember, Sankirtan was still a risky business, book distribution. You were liable to end up in jail. And we have some ladies who, spent half their Krishna consciousness sitting in jail for some time. because it was, obstruction. It was just a common thing, street obstruction. So it's not like now you just go out to Oxford Street, do whatever you like. You were out there, they caught you on Harinam. I was on Harinam when police caught us. So Saturday Harinam, it was also risky. And it was the same everywhere in the country. So 70 was sort of, I feel, the limit that was good to manage around the country. And then beyond that, I started sending some to Iceland and other far-flung places, or other places that we're not supposed to mention. And those devotees, so when we came back, there was no one in this yatra. There were 3 devotees of Bhaktivedanta Manor. It was Astasaki was the only pujari, dressing all the deities and cooking. It's empty. Gone. Chaitanya College was a little better off. Soho Street, I can't remember, but it's probably more the same. Prabhupada's disciples were here. They were the ones who remained, of course. But the disciples went, and then over the period of time, the disciples came to realize something actually was wrong, and they started coming back. And then the ones that we knew were here, but were neither with Jai Tirtha or not with ISKCON, so we tried to start bringing them back, and then gradually the yatra again built up, and then Bhagwan became Bhagwan Das. He became the GBC. I just want to mention that in 1981 was Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman was installed. Is that right? Yeah. And that happened at Ram Navami. And unfortunately, I wasn't there for that. I was in Leicester. Or was it Janmashtami? Ram Navami. And what's the plaque say? That they're installed. Those deities have a history. I ordered those deities. And those deities were meant to go to Chicago. I'll just mention a short story of Ram. Was that they were supposed to go to Chicago, and then Jai Tirtha, I guess, and I paid for the deities in full with American dollars, and Jai Tirtha foolishly repaid for them again. When they came, I said, how did they let the deities go? I mean, they knew they were for Chicago. He says, oh, we paid for them. So you paid for them? I already paid for them once. And I paid for them a second time. But I ordered the deities, and and they were made, and they're very beautiful. Although Sita Devi is a different Sita Devi than I ordered. So Sita Devi was very young, very beautiful. She's very beautiful now, but she's more. The idea was she's more motherly. She looks more, has that motherly look. And she was very beautiful. And but Ram was. If you go to Jaipur, then they always play it Ram blackish. So they do blackish tint. And when I went there, I told them Ram is not black. Ram is brown, green. And they didn't believe me. So, of course, at that time we didn't have folio. I wasn't carrying the ninth canto around with me, where it says that he is the color of mown grass, freshly mown grass. So I said, no, he's green. And it was a very entertaining session with the Murti Wala, very talented sculptor, and I said, paint him green. I said, are you serious? He said, yes, I wanted you to paint him green. So I went away, and when I came back the next morning, I mean, he painted him green. Not like London Ishwara is tinted, but he painted, I'm just looking at it, painted him solid green. like your scarf, solid green. And when I came there, with these huge crowds outside the chap's door, and I couldn't figure out what it was. He had invited all the Murtiwalas there in Jaipur to see this crazy American. They thought I was American. I'm not American, I'm sort of Hungarian gone to Canada. But for the crazy American who wanted Ram painted green. So I came in and it was like, it was a bit much. That's how he came here. He asked Rancho. Rancho had to take that color off, and then he sort of just tainted them, so highlight, that they're highlighted green. I think they should be like, but I was there and they said, okay, what color you want me to paint the others? Everyone thought, like this was some kind of entertainment, and all the other guys were waiting, what's he going to say? So that was Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman, 1981. Bhagwan became the GPC from 1982 to 1987. And he really helped save the yatra. This yatra was in a very deep financial problem. He was pumping 40,000 pounds, which at that time was a lot, from France, Italy, Spain, Portugal into this yatra. 40,000 pounds a year. How did the Vyasa sands look? Vyasa sands were how? Prabhupada was, that wasn't there. There was one for Prabhupada and there was one for, where were they? They were here, there? Jai Dev, you remember? You don't remember? But anyway, the Vyasa sands were here. Bhagwan was here. Where was he sitting? But they were here. One was here, one was there. Something like that. At the manor, there were two. There was one on either side of Prabhupada. One was for the local zonal acharya, and the other one was for a guest guru. So that's what the system was at the time. And Guru Puja entailed Guru Puja to Srila Prabhupada and Guru Puja to the zonal acharya. So then Bhagavan came, and he gave faith again to most of the devotees came back. But you can imagine what it's like. You got these 3 temples, and all of a sudden there's, practically speaking, practically no devotees in the yatra. So we came back with the 50 Sankirtan devotees. That was good, and he gave finances. That was the time when he also, a little while later, we sold the traveling temple. The traveling temple, I don't know, you've seen pictures of the traveling temple? Yeah, so that was a wonderful thing. There was an articulated lorry. It was designed by a very talented artist, Sankirtan devotee, Kamsa Hanta, who literally could sell ice to an Eskimo and be convinced that he needed more. And he designed that, and it was very much, it was the same pattern. It used molds from here. Inside it looked like a temple, outside, and when I had my first motorhome. Then I connected with the traveling temple, and I was traveling around with them. Bristol, Cardiff, we're traveling in that part of the country. Kripamoya Prabhu was there, Kalyapani Prabhu was there, and it was a great program. I don't know what it achieved. It may have also gotten some devotees, but it was very creative, very innovative. The Scottish devotee who was the driver, his name was, who's now in America. I forget. He was the driver because you had to have special, obvious driving license, a big lorry, and that was really very wonderful. So aside from that, aside from traveling temple, we sold the traveling temple, and then it wasn't easy. Bhagwan was he was a good manager. He was extremely charismatic. Probably 90% of whatever leadership I know now, I learned from him. And but he had one problem. He was proud. So that meant that in 1987, then he became the next casualty. It's, you wonder whether how much you want to get involved in British Yatra. It's not an easy place to be. People have a short lifespan, but of course that's not due to the UK. UK was and still is, I think, probably one of the best preaching places in the world for different reasons. Its connection with India. It's a very open place, and this social welfare system does really a lot to makes people useless enough that you can easily convince them to become Hare Krishnas. Not that Hare Krishnas are useless people, but they just sort of lose their way. And so in that period of time, between 82 and 87, there was another period of rebuilding. I was just reminded this morning of our 4-month Christmas marathon that we had. And then I was also the president of Chaitanya College, along with being Sankirtan leader. So I was regularly commuting between the manor and Chaitanya College. I won't tell you how fast I drove, but I could make it from one to the other at nighttime in 1 hour, 20 minutes. Of course, the roads were a little different at that time than now. I would wait. I would wait until like midnight. I would get up early, and then I would just drive. But it was again a very good time. We had this example of one Christmas marathon. We start off Christmas marathon with having a really nice target, and at that time, because of our financial situation, I introduced this painting sales. So if anyone's looking for who's the culprit, that's me. Sell paintings. You buy them for £3. Once again, thanks to the welfare system, people don't know the difference between a real painting and an imitation, and you sell it for 300. Or in the case of Kamsahanta, you sell it for 3,000. This is a rare painting. It says, in 20 years, you're going to sell this for 10 times its value, 20 times its value. And that brought the yatra back up on its feet. Jaidev Prabhu sort of joined it at that time, or started practicing Krishna consciousness from Rainham. And we have some other older devotees who are here. We have Radha Sangha and Shuddha Baba and the Jalpota clan and Dantasya, who just sort of like a 2-hour-long story on her own, just to stay all the escapades. Nonetheless, it wasn't being easy Sankirtan leader with her around. It was every day. I'm not joking, every day. It was a police adventure. We had to hire a lawyer just to keep her out of jail. But anyway, she did big. That was the main thing. And so because we couldn't afford to just distribute books, it wasn't making enough profit. And even to this day, there's very few devotees that make 2,000% profit on a book. So and that's how. But the yatra had expenses. We've got deities here. We've got a building here. You've got the manor. You've got over there. We had a beautiful place. Jaitirtha used to live in Aldenham House, which was just a village next door. Phenomenal facility, which unfortunately we didn't purchase when it was available for £40,000. And then we had Chaitanya College, and we had Panchatattva and Jagannath. Jagannath weren't here. Jagannath was, and the altar was a Rath Yatra cart. You seen pictures? So all glories to the pujaris who climbed up there every day, multiple times, to make offerings to Jagannath. Was on the top, it's full-size Rath Yatra cart, and once again this was Kamsahanta's idea between him and Jaitirtha, and underneath were Panchatattva. Unfortunately, Panchatattva are in Rome, and they're in the custody of the Gaudiya Math, although after I think about a 15-year court battle, we've finally gotten both the temple and the deities back, but they're still squatting, so that's a problem. Maybe they'll come back. I like to see Panchatattva come back to the UK. Actually, Madhusevita Prabhu, who's the GBC, has no objection to them coming back. They would look nice in Leicester. So Jagannath and Panchatattva were there. Chaitanya College, we had a Gurukul, we had the kids didn't run off with Jayatirtha. So, and that's why we started a business. And then the business was called, what was it called? QFA, Quality Fine Arts. We purchased paintings, sold paintings, framed paintings. We purchased frames. We were the #1 supplier of bogus paintings in the country. That was it. We built up a name. Many people do it now. I see them everywhere. No one can fool me with these paintings. I walk into a restaurant, I know, how much did you guys pay for this? It just came from Korea. It's just, they just paint these things, and they paint them multiple. And I guess now they got computers that can do all that. They don't even need people for it. So QFA, and there were a lot of devotees working in that QFA. That was in Watford. It was really sort of well-geared facility. Back to this marathon that was ladies were collecting, and the men were selling paintings. Ladies were selling paintings? Yes. Some would sell paintings. But Bhagwan started getting the traction going for books, and then we did start printing, and if you see any of these similar classics of India type books, those very traditional, which are not Prabhupada's binding, but like the way they do in Europe, in some places in Europe, where they did them. So it was the same way. And then we started again with the idea of book distribution, contact sales, contact Sankirtan. That 1 month Sankirtan became a 2 month Sankirtan, and then it went to 3 months, and then it went to 4 months. So devotees had built up a lot of faith by that time that they were willing to do that. And that was just one example. 1987, Bhagwan just departed. Everyone stayed. Devotees had seen it, or at least there were enough devotees who'd seen it that they were able to keep the others in check. I don't know what it feels like for someone to lose one guru, what to speak of 2 gurus. And there are many devotees, for instance, one is Shruti Dharma Prabhu, who was initiated both times by both gurus, and still to accept the 3rd guru, and to still have actual faith. That's faith. That's quite extraordinary. And you could see in this case that, the disciples were actually, in one sense, more advanced and more dedicated and more devoted to Srila Prabhupada's mission than the Guru. Jaitirtha Prabhu, anyway, unfortunately, he left this world. That isn't a savory story, and it wasn't a nice way, but Hare Krishna. And my God, Brother Bhagavan is still out somewhere on the West Coast. And then it went on. Then 1987, in this temple room, was the first time I gave initiation, of which I've had many second thoughts since then. Not an easy occupation. But I also became, same year, GBC, or maybe early, maybe it was 86. Okay, 3rd time around. One thing is losing Guru, the other is now build up and distribute books. Bhagavad was TP, Akandari was temple president in Manor. Chaitanya College, by 1986 or 85, was sold. I can't say any more about that, so I'll start crying. But it was definitely, well, I don't know. I was going to say it was the best preaching facility in the UK. I mean, the Manor is obviously a phenomenal preaching facility. You can see that now. I don't know how the two would compare if we both had them at the present time. But the one thing was, the Chaitanya College had space, and it had plenty of space. So that was sold. That was a horrible, and unfortunately, our devotees were still in a certain state of faith and Krishna consciousness that what our authorities say we do. The GBC actually came here. They had a meeting here at that time. I can't remember what it was about. There were a couple of meetings in Chaitanya College. One was when Jaitirtha had left, and following that, this was another meeting. And I remember one GBC member asking me, I think it may have been Balabant, so what do you think about this idea of selling Chaitanya College? And I said, well, Seems like that's what Bhagavan wants to do, and Drishtadyumna Maharaj was here as the national secretary at that time, and he hated Chaitanya College. Don't know quite why, but it was quote unquote his words, and so he thought that to get out of our financial situation, because we were still not standing on our own feet 3 years later. So, I mean, that's really cooperation. The European Yatra was pumping £500,000 a year into this yatra to keep it going. And that's a lot. I was there, I was watching Bhagwan on a regular basis, putting pressure on other centers, and was really putting a lot of pressure on them to actually bring money here, because you had to pay bills. And you had Gurukul, and you had so many other things going on. So that was really extraordinary cooperation. And Chaitanya College did fill it, and after that, at a certain point in 1987, when I became chief, first thing I did was that we really went on a cost-cutting and price-cutting campaign, and at a certain point we started to break even. And at a certain point then I'd had enough of paintings, and the book distribution started building up, so we shut it down. That was probably a mistake. It had the Grihastha community been more together and taken it over, it was maintained phenomenal amount of devotees. It was a pretty sort of neutral thing. You didn't have to manufacture anything. You just sold these things. It was a good profit. It maintained families easily, and if you were a good salesman, and even if you weren't a good salesman, then there was lots of production, there was lots of management, there was a lot of framing, there was a lot of stretching and things like that to do. So it was a good business to take over. We let that go. I was going to say that the other mistake was that we didn't protest. Had we protested, Balavan asked, well, what do you think? And I said, well, is it really important? He says, yeah, it's important. But that's not how we were trained. We were trained that if your authorities tell you something, then that's what you do. I've learned since then, and things have changed, I think, somewhat since then, that people do voice their opinions. Had we voiced our opinions, we would still have it. Anyway, that was a great mistake. Someone said this is going to set the UK Yatra back 20 years. I think it's probably set the UK Yatra back about 80 years, because you don't know what to do with devotees, and therefore, anyway, and of course the cooperation, the devotee making with Bhagwan was also good, and then it went down. And when I became GBC, we went back to maintaining the yatra by book distribution. That was Bhagavadashraya Prabhu here, Akhanda Prabhu there, and then of course there was also the Indian community. Connecting with the Indian community, there was ICAP. I can't remember what that was short for. That was the Life Membership Making Program, and we had various different programs for how to engage the Indian community and helping to maintain Bhaktivedanta Manor. And they were quite innovative and very extraordinary ways. You did what? You bought a, what was that you showed me?
Oh yeah, the Save the Campaign.
And
It was campaigning to stop the closure of the temple.
yeah, stop the closure of the temple. And then we did things like, selling bonds, something to the equivalent of selling bonds. buy £100 bond now, and if you want to cash it in later on, then it's okay. Of course, it's not going to be okay if you try and cash it in later on. But and they were very creative people at that time around Bhaktivedanta Manor. They're still there now.
BMF started from that.
Well, yeah, it was ICAP. It changed into BMF. There was UKLM. It had different incarnations. We had to sort of change the profile just to sort of leave the skeletons behind in the closet. And then the yatra really just started going. 1986, 87, 87. Harikesh Prabhu was visiting, and he found out somehow that I was Hungarian origin. So he asked me, why don't you go to Hungary to preach? When I became a GBC, I made a condition to the GBC. Says, I'll be a GBC for the UK, but I won't be a GBC for any other country other than the UK. I'm just staying here, because I saw how GBCs get spread out all over the place, and I said, I'm just staying here, and I'm not going anywhere else. So 87. So I started going to Hungary in 1987, and anyway, the rest is sort of history. From becoming an occasional visit, and I was going over there as a representative of QFA, and I was buying Hungarian boards that were very unique paintings that we really sold for a fortune. But they cost a lot. They cost like £300-400. And they had an outlet here in London, and then I went over there to the suppliers and tried to find the artists, but I didn't really succeed. So that was still in communist days, and somehow or another I managed to find my wig from old Chicago days, airport days. It was still somewhere in the bottom of, I had my Sankirtan bag, and I don't know, 7 years later it was still there. I don't know if I washed it, but I resurrected it. And that's what I used to go for 2 years to Hungary, until then there was the Berlin Wall fell, everything fell, the USSR dissolved, and then we started just going as devotees. And at that point, from 1989 until around when I was GBC, 2003, 4. So I was traveling back and forth in a motorhome. I told you I lived in a motorhome. My average was traveling around the country 6 times a year. So that includes going up to Scotland. And Manchester, Scotland, Leicester, Liverpool, Ireland. That was interesting. North Ireland, because we're parked out somewhere, and all of a sudden at night, helicopters, machine guns all around us. I want to know, what are you guys doing over here? Radha Krishna is sleeping out. What do you think we're doing? By the way, you should know that I used to park out here, just on Soho Square, just next to Paul McCartney's place, and dozens of times that's where I slept. The alternative was I just went very near to Regent's Park. There was one good spot where we were able to park up. And here nobody bothered us except for all the drunks banging on the street. In those days, I could still sleep through anything. And so in that period of time, I was traveling on the UK, and I was traveling back and forth to Hungary. That was another thing. It was more or less a month there, month here, month there, month here. I wasn't doing anything. That was, first it was Madan Gopal. He was the driver, and then it was Abhimanyu. And they were like really empowered people. The more they drove, the more they wanted to drive. They just keep going, 24 hours, 36 hours, it didn't matter. And meanwhile I was working, I was sleeping, and we would park up, and we would cook. So it was very nice. And of course I had my deities. I had Gorni Tai, and they're the ones who actually kept me alive all that time and protected me. I brought them here from, 1980. I'd 81. I'd gone to Mayapur. I'd gone to India. Devotee with my friend Shravanananda, who passed away recently. He's the one who ordered them. He worked with the BBT in Calcutta, and he arranged for the deities, and I picked them up from him. So that was really wonderful. And from that time up until now, I don't worship them anymore directly because I have Radha Damodar. But in that time they were always here. But it was too much, and the Hungarian Yatra was just growing too much, and UK was, we had gone back to the traditional system where each temple stands on its own feet, each temple manages its own resources, manpower, etc. It's the way Srila Prabhupada wanted things to go. I don't say it's necessarily being the most productive. Compared to what was going on, even when Bhagavan was here, there were extraordinary times for the British Yatra. And then I just had to find someone to be a GBC. Yes, Ireland, North Ireland. Let's make the distinction between the two. Scotland, and our temples throughout the UK, and then traveling. So it was not a really very practical thing to do, and the UK really deserved a full-time GBC. But at least I wanted someone who was going to concentrate and spend their time on it. Pragosh Prabhu didn't listen to me, and he took on other responsibilities. I just wanted someone to focus on the UK. The UK deserved it, it needs it, and it has extraordinary potential. So when I just concentrated on Hungary, where's Hungary? I don't know if any of you could find it on a map. And it's really inconsequential place. This is the, well, now that's to be decided in 15 days whether this is the most important city in the world.
It'll survive it.
It'll survive it. There was one devotee, Indian leader, when he heard, Maharaj, you're going to give up the UK, you're not going to be GBC of UK. I says, no, I can't. It's not possible to do both things. At least not the way I do things. And he said, but at least London. Don't give up London. How can I be the GBC of London? So it's a extraordinary yatra. I learned a lot of things at that time. I saw a lot of things. met a lot of wonderful, extraordinary people. I went through a lot of disappointments, and learned a lot. And I guess that's how people get to learn things. They say that's how people become wise. I don't know how wise I've become, but it was a good experience. I just saw it as Krishna's arrangement. I left Chicago with a very heavy heart. I had an extraordinary relationship with Kishore Kishori. I used to make the garlands. I used to. I didn't dress them, but I used to buy all of their. I used to buy their clothes. I used to buy their jewelry and things, and I used to spend the most money in Vrindavan. I actually trained up the current Murtiwalas as to what Western standards are like and what Westerners want. They're a little different than what usually the Indian tastes were. But yes, and I used to always pray to Radha Gokulananda. I can't, why did I have to go there? And I just, I have a wonderful relationship with the deities here, but it's not like that. So somehow or another, I need something like that. So that's what I got when I got Radhesham. So who are the deities in Hungary at our farm, and I brought them from. Actually, it was Balagopal Devidasi who ordered them, and then we brought as well as Gornitai, and they stayed. They were my office at that time was at the end of the corridor on the manor. I don't know what it is now, but that's where I was. And there's two windows there, and they were sitting for 2 years on the window shelf. I was sitting there. So it became a bit of a thing. People came to take darshan of Radha Gokulananda, and then they came up there, and everyone's looking inside the window. This queue of people staring in the window all the time. It's hard to sort of run a yatra with all these people looking in. Oh, can I come in and take darshan? So it was like that, and we got 5 minutes, and we should make way for Damodarashtaka. I won't stay for that. I had Damodarashtaka to Radha Damodar this morning, and I'm leaving for India day after tomorrow, so I don't want to stay up late tonight. But it's been wonderful being here. We could go on, and I could have asked some other devotees to speak, but as I knew time was limited, so Prabhupada really wanted a lot from the UK. It was not just an issue of because it's a great place, but the British subjugated India, and in one sense, although Prabhupada didn't identify himself as an Indian, but at the same time, he did feel that it was just vengeance for Indian culture to dominate and really spread its roots throughout the country, and to actually really give the British what they need, which is transcendental knowledge and the absolute truth, and that's what's there in their books. I'm just a guest now. I come, people introduce me. I found that strange in the beginning, but now I got used to it, because I don't know most anybody either. So I don't know almost anybody's names. And it was a wonderful experience. thank you for inviting me to speak about it. 50 years, it's an achievement. We're here 50 years later. And let's see who's here 50 years from now. But anyway, let's hope that this property is here. And it's a wonderful thing that Radha and Ishwar, they're willing to stay throughout all of these absurdities that go on. And they just continue to tolerate and tolerate. I would always think one morning I'm going to come down here. Well, come down. My favorite place to take rest was straight up above, which was Murli's room at one time until he moved out. I don't know what it is now, because you could always feel their presence up there. And the thing is just, they're not going to be on the altar anymore. I'm the only part of this place. But they're here. They're here for the long haul. Jayita, you've been here how long?
45 minutes.
No. How many years? This man has stuck it out. Excuse me for calling you a man. Prabhupada would do that.
Probably a woman. It's by your mercy, Maharaj.
And that's what Prabhupada wanted. People to stay in their place. He complained about your Westerners are so restless. You just can't stick to doing one thing. You always want to do something different instead of just stick to one thing. So that's a wonderful achievement, and it's no easy thing being here. I spent some nights over here. I know what it's like sleeping here. This is, like being in a train station. It's a tough place to live in, and it's a tough place to manage. So, thank you so much. That's a really wonderful achievement. 20 years. Hare Krishna. And thank you everyone who's helping making it happen in their own way. And we'll see you again. Hare Krishna.
Sivarama Maharaj ki.